I spend a lot of time thinking about how to get kids to read. And if you're a parent or someone who's teaching outside of the main school system, maybe you do too. There was this one year. I've taught for 15 years, first and second grade, but this one year, it was exceptional. And when I say that, I mean the timed test at the end of the year. Sometimes it's not timed, sometimes it is. Well, actually, the more I think about it, it's always timed in one way or another. And they count how many words the kids miss, and they figure out how many they got right, and whether they can understand what they're reading. And this is the end of the year reading test. The exceptional year came when at the beginning of the year I wrote down these 10 things, and they were a progression. It started with wanting to read, and it dealt with things like tracking the print and simple ways to teach vocabulary and practice it at home, and phonics, which is letter sounds and word sounds and rhythm in reading and simple online ways to read at home. And finally, comprehension and how to kind of whittle through all the school talk, the academic talk. What a great year. This is break time in my room, and I'm giving these girls little polished glass rocks that cost me a few bucks for a bag. I'm not into bribing, but once in a while, a little gift for reading on your own can keep them inspired and motivated.
Octopus. Some people eat octopus.
The category is food. The words start with the letters of the alphabet. It's one of many word games we play around the house and in class. Crafts can be built around words too. Sure, we play Monopoly and those other standards, but word clue games are a good time, and students love to play in groups.
Number 1 clue says like chocolate. Number 2 clue says you get it or bring it.
When they're together, they whisper answers to each other, and reading flows out of a game instead of a chore. I also order books that come in the mail to the house. My daughter looks forward to getting it and then kicking back with a cold beverage and reading, well, her morning paper. They make it fun with quizzes, activities, and really cool articles. Also, I keep a journal, and so does she. We read it back to each other, and nothing builds a knowledge of reading like reading what you've experienced and written. And I like to read to her every night. I like to have an easy book with short, simple, one-syllable words, a medium difficulty book, and a chapter book. She's not only picking up the words, but different rhythms and reading styles with each book. The airport does not have a good sense of humor. Puppet shows, props, stuffed animals, anything that keeps their interest in reading. And if you take away nothing else, I would say read to them at night. It's that magical time when the turning of the pages sort of becomes part of their soul, like a gentle ocean wave coming in and out, and books and words become the fabric of their being. I know that sounds heavy duty, but I really believe in that. So before you dive into the specifics of reading, please consider building that intent.
Morning, said Vic. I must pick corn. I must sort my toys.
Tracking and orientation. What is tracking? Well, tracking just means, can I find my place in the book or the text that's in front of me? When we're grown up, we usually read without our fingers, but all through school, kids need them to read. And you want your reader to read without those fingers so they can just fly like wild dogs in a field. But they also have to be able to find things in text, keep their place during reading tests. Tracking is an essential skill. It sounds so easy, but it's not. Let's start this way. I throw with my right hand. I write with my right hand. My right hand is my dominant reading hand. I've tried it with the opposite hand. I just don't get the results. Kids get lost. So I teach kids a couple things with tracking. I put my palm flat down on the paper or book, like I'm making a fist, and I stick my finger out, and I move it back and forth. This makes it easy to move your hand. It's harder to move your hand when you're on your fingertips or your fingers are curled over. Or they can make a little platform with their fist. That's okay, like a camera tripod almost. And I teach them to find the beginning of the line and the end of the line and to move to the next line. You'd be surprised how many really good readers get stuck at the end of a line for a second or two, and how much that slows them down and diminishes their understanding of the story, the comprehension. Also, I want to get kids to where they're reading the middle 80% of the words. Let me explain that. You want to go back and forth so their fingers are stopping not quite at the end and not quite at the beginning of the next line. Your eyes can catch what's on the outside. When a struggling reader sits down in front of me, I watch their hands. What do I see in this reader? I see a boy who doesn't have his palm down or any sort of solid base on the paper. He's kind of got his reading hand sort of slouched over, and that's not a good sign. And what's this boy's opposite hand doing? Playing with the rings in the binder or the paper or the book. This is normal for the opposite hand to be twitching or moving a little bit, but you want a sort of symmetry, almost a little poetic dance with the reading hand. You don't want the opposite hand to be guiding the show. See this girl?
To go, and now you will have a nice garden.
3 months before, she read 23 words a minute, and now she's up to 80 words a minute. She doesn't have perfect tracking form. Her hands aren't flat and moving smoothly, but she has rhythm with her hand, her dominant reading hand, and that's great when she reads. Also, her free hand is playing a little bit, but it's not running the show. It's gently moving around, letting the unconscious part of her brain drift while her focused part that's connected to her reading hand is moving along that print. And I'll just mention orientation. Orientation is what the child is doing when the book first comes to the desk or wherever they're sitting, or the text. Are they looking at it? Are their hands up on the desk? Are they involved in the text like a batter in the batter's box? You want to get them right to that title, right to that text, and then you go from there and get them to the first sentence and the last sentence of the story. So build that intent, make sure the child has time to read, even if it's just watching you, and keep track of that tracking and orientation. So I'm going to hold the microphone, and this is what I do in class. I sometimes bring a microphone and I try to make it interesting. Hey, you guys, it's time to play Name That Sound. Dun, 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 dun. I've got their attention. I'll hold the microphone. Usually it's a professional quality broadcast microphone. And the kids like to play a game. Treat it as a game and keep it short. That's how you teach phonics. Everything they need to know for early phonics can be put on a board this size. And this is, to me, is the Bible. So let's get into it. Letter sounds, consonant, vowel, consonant blending, silent E, digraphs, vowel combinations, blends. One more time. Letter sounds, CVC blending, silent E, digraphs, vowel combinations, blends. So let's dive into how I teach it. Letter sounds, this is a kinder skill, but they've got to know it. When they're tested, it's big A and it's random, small s, maybe a small u, big N, and they have to do it like this. A, B, F, K, P. So the way to teach the alphabet is not A, B, C, D, E, F, G. V, W, Y. Good. I would say the short vowel sounds for the vowels. So you want to go A, B, K, D, E, F, G. And on G, we use what's called a hard G sound. That's the predominant G sound. And then you teach the soft G, or I do, as a rule breaker. J, 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 like gym, gymnasium. I. Again, the short vowel sound I, not the long vowel sound I. J, K, L, M, N, A, P, Qua. Q is qua. S, T, A, V, W, X, Y, Z. This is a really huge skill. In kindergarten, those letter sounds are put into a consonant, vowel, consonant pattern. And I often teach this different ways. But these words are called nonsense words, and they're arranged in random order so that students can't memorize them. They have to read. In kindergarten, they segment. And in first grade, second grade, third grade, they have to read.
Pod.
Nice.
They're the building blocks to larger words like tambourine. So I'll teach it like this. I'll have them grab their whiteboard marker and I'll say the sounds and have them write it. I'll say t, a, m, have them write tam. Or I'll say the sounds myself with a sheet or board that's already written on, and I'll say b, and they have to say the word rab, ba, in. Or sometimes I'll read these, rab, bin, zud, and then make them say the next one. Cub,
Cub.
Nif, Liam. Good job. I'll have students read them. I'll have students come up and point to them. You want to change your approach on this, and I'll try to get to what works and what sticks, because not the same thing works for everyone else.
Lock.
This is a more standardized approach. When I do silent E, I put my finger over my mouth and I'll say, ah, ah, ah. That's a short vowel sound. That O is. It's ah, ah, ah. Your lips don't move. And you know your lips don't move when you say short vowels? Ah, eh, eh. I know you're trying it right now, right? When the vowel says its name, O, your lips have to move. O, that's a long vowel. I use a little, I guess you could call it a gimmick, but it's a lot of fun. It's a performance, sort of. I stole it from another teacher. I have a cape with the letter E, and a student stands at the door, and I say, you don't want to just hop. You want to be filled with hope. Super E, come help us make the O say its name. Super E comes flying in, and the O says, hope, and the whole class says, hope. I don't want to just look at my kid. I want to fly a kite, and Super E comes running in, kite. It's marvelous. Super E, the cape. Then print or write your own sentences with silent E words, circle them, say them, and read them. I teach this pretty standard in an I say, you say way. Okay, students, I'm going to say the sound. Listen to me say all the sounds. Sh, ch, wa, th. These are digraphs. They're two consonants put together to make a new sound. And there's only, 8, 9, or 10 of these? And then I'll say, okay, now I say the sound and you say the sound. I'll go back again because practice makes perfect. I say shh, you say shh, they'll say it. I say ch, you say ch. And then the third time around, I'll say, okay, I'm going to say the sound and the word, but I want you to just say the word. Now they're reading that sound and a word, right? Shh, ship. You say ship. This is a pretty standardized approach too. I'll usually do blends in a story. Blends are two consonants put together that make the same sound in it, and it seems easy, but it's a tricky skill. So I'll have a little story that I wrote up that says something like, the blue truck went down the creek. It was a shady, beautiful place. He got stuck in the mud. He slipped. He frowned. The driver frowned. He wanted to fly away. We'll go through that story and we'll circle these blends, and then I'll have them written down. I'll say, okay, let's practice them. Bull, tur. I say bull, you say bull. I say tur, you say tur. They love that pattern, and they really respond to it if you try that. These are vowel combinations, and I will say, okay, O, OA, boat, OW, snow. OW also has a rule breaker sound. It's ow, like cow for rule breaker. Oh, rule breaker. These are the basic ways I teach this. Do this 3 to 5 minutes, all these sounds here, for 2 weeks. Your child will have a solid phonics foundation. And again, phonics, it's just for them to decode on their own. When a child is reading, don't make them sound it out, please.
What?
The cat.
The cat?
Give them the word. If they're stuck on a word like remember, just try to get the first syllable. Re. And then remember. You know. Don't teach them to try to sound every sound out. They'll go crazy. They'll run for their lives. They'll start growing beans or playing guitar, maybe in Venice, California. You want them to have the word. Give them the word. So after you've taken them through that PH word we call phonics, you want the kids to apply the phonics, to seek it out and understand it themselves, and there is no better site for that than Starfall. Oh, I'm stuck on the word has again. Starfall takes students through individual sound modules or phonics modules, and students don't realize it. It starts with the short vowel sounds and then goes into silent E, digraphs, blends, all those beautiful things we talked about in our phonics module.
Silent E at the end of the word, end of the word, end of the word. The silent E at the end of the word makes the I say I.
I use Starfall for the first 3 months of the year.
Has a big ball.
Good job.
And then I graduate to Tumble Books.
Launchpad countdown
Tumble Books costs a lot, but you don't have to pay it. Their main clients are libraries throughout the nation. I just click around until I find a library that lets me get on for free. So I'm trying to get into Tumble Books. I've Googled Atlanta Schools Tumble Books. That's their library, and clicked onto that. There's all sorts of places with their library. I click for Tumble Books, and then I go up to this little tab that says Storybooks. Click on that, and it flashes up just a lot of books, tons of them. I click Read Online after I click a book, and there I go. Every story in here is pretty interesting.
Who did identical things.
You can get on a lot of library sites and just ask them if you can sign up for a library card, and once you have that, you're in for free again. So you can access Tumble Books. So with this barrage of technology, I don't think you have to overload yourself.
Rolled my eye.
Starfall and Tumble Books.
Colin had gone nuts.
Well, when it comes to bigger words, I always say chunk it out, don't sound it out. So what is chunking? It's basically syllable work. Syllables create rhythm, believe it or not, and it sounds simple, but if you clap syllables, remember, it's a great way to remember how many syllables are in words, and more importantly, get a feel for the flow of the word. I also do gestures in syllable work. Teachers say there's about 7 main syllables they want to teach younger readers, but I focus on 2 for bigger words, and that is open syllables and closed syllables. So, back to the word remember. If you start with that first chunk, that first syllable, it's open, re, then it's closed, mem, and then it's closed, bur. Why is a syllable open or closed? Well, re ends with a vowel, and there's nothing closing that vowel in. It's just re, and sometimes I'll teach it that way. Re, mem, bur. But in mem and bur, that vowel is closed in. M-E-M, hey, I got M's around me. Bur, B-E-R, oh, I got the B and the R, I can't get out, I can't get out. Re, mem, bur. Again, though, you want them to focus on that first syllable. And I don't care that they know that every syllable is open or closed, because there are some variations and rule breakers. But the idea is to get them thinking about bigger words and, again, focusing on that first chunk. Protect. I will protect you from the storm. What do you do with something like that? Well, I would say beautiful. T is a rule breaker. Normally it'd be tie, beautiful, and that would be open. But I would say open, full. Again, you're just trying to get students to think about the chunks in words, and the idea is to learn the word. It's really not the syllable work. It's the learning the words and seeing patterns, developing rhythms, beautiful. Oh, and thinking about these big words and that first time they hit it versus getting bogged down in every letter. Because if you have a word like beautiful, that's going to freak out a young reader. B-E, B-E-A-A-T, it's just not going to work. So, well-taught, well-timed syllable work. I think it's essential for young readers to learn larger words quickly. When it comes to tricky sounds, I say teach them vocabulary. Teach them the word, and the tricky sounds won't have to be broken down. But they do need to be practiced a little bit to gain an understanding of the language, and I find myself going over the same sounds every year. When I teach these tricky sounds, I keep the teaching simple. The sounds are tricky enough. I put them in columns, and you might want to call this an expanded T-chart. And I'll say na, no, na, ni, na, knit, right. And I'll have the kids repeat after me. I say IGH is I. I say na, ite. What's the word? Night. And then I do that with shun, a syllable chunk that's not just a tricky sound, and I'll put them into sentences. My what hurts? My knee hurts. So what we're doing is we're repeating the words, the sound in the word, and knowing the word. And then we go back to maybe repeating the words, and then we put it into a sentence. If it's too tricky, like station, I'll go ahead and take that word and have it right in there when I flash it up on the overhead or the projector. So if you do this at home or in the classroom, keep it simple, keep it in columns. I say, you say, na, ni, and do it over and over. It's a good way to learn these tricky sounds quickly.
Dive in. Swim to shore. Dive in. Swim. Dive in. Swim.
It's a lot easier to read if you just know the word when you see it versus having to sound out a lot of words. There's two things I'm thinking when I'm approaching vocabulary, teaching it. The first is, how do I build a love of words like I have, and how do I pass that along to the students? And the second is, okay, now that I've done that, what am I doing during my actual vocabulary lessons? So, love of words. It may not sound that exciting at first to write down a couple clues on the board and have students guess the word.
Regret. That's a tricky word. Did you know what that was before we started?
But what makes that exciting is to put students into groups and have them go against each other and maybe write the word down on a little piece of paper after they've discussed it among themselves. The discussions can get spirited, the students have fun, and they are getting excited about words while they guess similar words to the actual word. That's one of many ways I build a love of words in my classroom. Then when I'm teaching actual vocabulary, what I want is to get as many words as possible presented to students in a day as I can, and do it with as much repetition as possible. So I use three main tools, three main avenues, and they're simple when I'm teaching vocabulary. The first is have the students get back in groups and flash the words to each other. Before that, we've been on the carpet, we've done it together, and I'm really monitoring that. I'm walking around and saying the words and standing within ear distance so that I can help them out quickly and they don't get bogged down. They love to be in groups together. The second way is gestures. Over. If something is running freely, you may say wild and shake your hair. Down, up, through. There's all these little gestures for every little word.
Guys, dive in. Exercise. What's that rumble?
And kids really remember gestures. They stick. When they act out a word, they remember the word. And finally, use the word in a sentence. Say a word that's sort of strange and new and unfamiliar, like hallelujah. You could say, the whole choir said hallelujah. And the students get a meaning, and you kind of sing it. The whole choir said hallelujah. And right away it begins to stick. And of course you'd say that in a respectful way. You don't want to demean words or cultures or beliefs when you do that. So sometimes, as a last resort, we'll draw pictures, but I've seen words taught with pictures and drawings, and it just takes forever. Kids often get bogged down in their art, and they lose track of what they're doing and get focused on their perfect drawing or coloring. So once in a while pictures, but the three main ways of teaching vocabulary: kids in groups flashing words, after a carpet vocabulary lesson, using words in sentences, and using gestures. That's all after building a love of those vocabulary words.
Bell, blow, breakfast, bot.
You ever notice that your child or student can sing every word to a favorite song on the radio, but sometimes they have trouble remembering what they read? That's because of the rhythm of the song. It just naturally gets into a child and the words just flow. I believe every child is born with a love of singing, and it kind of gets pushed out of us when someone tells us we don't have the best singing voice. But I encourage that in the classroom, and if I can get students to open up and let loose with just a little bit of singing, and it can be kind of talk singing, it doesn't have to be, perfect singing, they'll really get on the road to developing rhythm in their reading. And I picture rhythm as like riding a bike through the hills. Remember, in stories there's a lot of punctuation. So to read smoothly, you have to read question marks and have your voice go up, and then read sentences with a period or a comma at the end. Your voice will stay flat or drop. When a student can see that and read and anticipate, instantly their text has meaning. So there's three main ways that I get rhythm into the classroom, but there are many, many ways. I'll just share a few. One is when we're going over vocabulary words and the kids are close, usually on the carpet, I'll take one of those words and just have a short 2 or maybe 4 line verse or song out of it. And I'll think of that before I start teaching, like environment. We'll say something like, the environment is pretty. It can be the country or the city. In a storm it can be crazy, so clean it up and don't be lazy. And then I'll sing that a couple times, really low and soft, and the kids might look around, but I've got their attention. And then we'll write it on the board, and we'll just leave it up there all day, and we'll sing that 3 or 4 times. Not only are they learning that tricky word environment, but they're learning words around it, and they're developing a rhythm in their reading. Some days I'll just take a big picture from the computer, put it on a piece of paper, and write 4 lines or so, and maybe expand that to 6 or 8. And I'll start putting it on their desk, and as I put the paper on their desk, I'll lightly sing it. So by the time the whole class has that little text, they've heard it and they've got the rhythm in their head before they even read it. And when they get the rhythm first, those words tend to come out a lot more smoothly, and they're having more fun. And the third main way I teach rhythm in the classroom is through the regular curriculum. So often that gets overlooked, but there's usually some great treasures like poetry songbooks and audio CDs with great songs on them. Parents at home, you can take a few lines of a favorite song on the radio that your child knows, write them down, sit down and sing them, like have them on a note card. And if your child's looking at you, singing them, smiling, enjoying yourself, they're going to be a lot more interested than just saying, here, read this. So to summarize, my 3 main practices to get rhythm in reading: I take a word, expand on it spontaneously and write it down and leave it on the board all day. I'll pass out little verses or poems that I've pre-written and start singing them when I hand them to the children. Or I'll use the songs that are embedded in the school's curriculum. Parents at home, you can take a short song and you can write it down, something from the radio. Rhythm in reading. I think it's so important to develop young readers. When I first started teaching, I relied too heavily on pictures for comprehension. Now I build fluency, reading fluency, before I get too far into pictures.
Look at the paw prints along among.
I want students to hear words, to recognize word patterns, to gain meaning from words, to hear sounds in words, and to build a love of words before we spend too much time roaming through an illustration. After they've started reading, then we dive into the pictures and relate it to the text, and that's when I believe pictures become a valuable comprehension tool, but I've learned never to substitute them for reading fluency. This was a new way to what?
Communicate.
Awesome, you guys. So what do I want them to do first when it comes to reading comprehension? I want them to be oriented when they approach a book and look at that title. The main idea is what? A babysitter. This is a story about a little boy who's nervous to have a babysitter. This is natural for most kids. When they have picture books, they look right to the title, but I get them started quickly in stories that have no pictures. If a student can check that title and the first couple sentences of the story, usually they can get a main idea from it. Reading comprehension is important and it lasts a lifetime. But surprisingly, the skills learned in kindergarten through 2nd grade are many of the same skills, comprehension skills, that are learned and assessed in junior high and high school. So that's good news. If a child learns a comprehension skill early on, chances are they'll do very well in junior high and high school. Sure, new skills are introduced, but the core reading skills stay largely the same. There are 3 that I really cover a lot early in first grade. I repeat them over and over, and I'd like to share them. First skill, main idea and details. The second skill I really cover a lot is compare and contrast. And the third, characters and setting. Let's start with main idea and details. When a student gets a story, a book, or a short text, I like them thinking title. Look at the title. That's usually the main idea. Not always, but usually. And then I like them quickly skimming the beginning, the middle, and the end. What's the first 2 sentences? Dad and I went fishing one day. We walked down a long sandy path to a small, beautiful pond. They go to the middle. When the fish hit, my pole bent over like a candy cane. And then they go to the ending. We didn't eat the fish, so we threw it back and it swam freely. That made us happy. Right away, you know that you're reading a story that has got you hooked, pardon the pun, and it's going to be a happy story. And this is something that you want to read because it's family time together and it's got some drama involved. So main idea and details is a big skill. It's also called plot later on, and that's the thing with reading comprehension. Some comprehension skills are just reintroduced with a different name. Plot is beginning, middle, end. Same thing. Compare and contrast. What is that? That's comparing characters in a story. Tell me something about cats, Dante.
They meow.
They meow. How are dogs different? What do they do?
They bark.
They bark. You just compared and contrasted them. Or comparing one story to another, or maybe comparing a story to real life experiences. Mariana, what do cats do?
They scratch furniture.
They scratch. This skill is important, I feel, because it goes well into the corporate world. You're always having to sift through information quickly and find out how things are the same and how they're different and how you're going to handle those differences. The last big skill kind of happens with compare and contrast and main idea and details. That's characters and setting. Knowing who the characters are and where the story is happening is big because that gets the students thinking about the small things, the characters and how they're handling every situation, and the big idea, the setting, where it's all taking place and why it's taking place there. Comprehension, it's a big fancy word for do I know what I'm reading and can I remember it? Learning these individual skills really helps a student along that path. So what I believe really works when it comes to reading comprehension, that is understanding what you read, is building fluency, smooth reading first, an understanding and love of words. Then we focus on main idea and details, characters and setting, and compare and contrast. I believe you can take those 3 skills and add one more, drawing conclusions, to have a solid comprehension base. Drawing conclusions. Drawing conclusions is a step into independent thinking, deeper thinking. It's what might happen? What do you think would happen? Based on the text, what might happen next? How does he feel? What does she think? Drawing conclusions means you have to understand the story, or at least the few sentences they're asking about, and then think of what might be the best, most logical answer. This can be practiced with a simple piece of paper. Write an event in the middle, and then write some possible outcomes in the circles outside that middle. Beyond drawing conclusions, I work on 3 other comprehension skills regularly: cause and effect, fact and opinion, and a deeper understanding of main idea and details, finding the main idea of each paragraph and really distinguishing the difference between a detail and a main idea. So, cause and effect. There's paint all over the sink.
What?
You guys give me a why.
Why?
The set? Why is there paint all over the sink?
Why? Because they put paint. Wait, there was water paint and then they threw it in there.
They threw the paint in there. Crazy kids threw the paint. So what happened? Paint all over. Why did it happen? Kids threw the paint.
Threw the paint.
I'm just going to call that paint throwing. Ooh, that's a mess.
This is really a lesson in academic vocabulary. Cause and effect messes with children's minds. It's hard to understand those words and what they mean. I would love to see this taught as, why did this happen? After all, it's only one more syllable than cause and effect. All right, what's the effect? Again, pencil and paper or whiteboard and marker, and write down what happened and why. If students start thinking of what happened, the effect, usually they can come up with a cause pretty quickly. Fact and opinion. This is trickier than it sounds. If I say, Mr. Johnson thinks this is the best school, a student might hear the best school and think, well, that's a fact. We are. However, it's Mr. Johnson's opinion. Anytime you have what someone thinks or someone feels, you have an opinion. So this takes practice. How do you feel? What do you think? What do you like? What don't you like? What's the best? What's the worst? Ooh, that's disgusting. That tastes good. If it's a fact, teach it this way. Can you prove it? Is the rock brown? Can I take a picture of the rock and show someone? I always teach students the main idea of paragraphs. Have them look at that first line of the paragraph to get the main idea of the paragraph. Now, if you're a teacher and you're watching this, you may say, well, what about other important comprehension skills like fantasy and realism? Well, I think fantasy and realism is pretty easy. Fact and opinion is much more difficult. Fantasy. Did a dog talk? Then it's made up. It's a fake story. It's fiction. Also, if you're a teacher, you may be saying, why isn't he mentioning building background or making predictions? Well, building background means getting students to realize their own past, things that have happened to them, so they can connect it to the story. It's a great thing to do, but I use it like phonics. They must have an understanding of it, but I'd rather a student uses the main idea and details skill of quickly looking at the title, the beginning, the middle, and the end, because so many texts or stories don't have anything from the child's past. Also, making predictions, which basically means guessing the ending of a story. I use it at the beginning of the year, and it's a good way to get students to think about what they're reading, but I don't overload on it. Why? Because some students come up with fairly outlandish, sort of crazy fun endings, and oftentimes the story can't live up to that. I want students to be excited about words and the real story that's in front of them. Comprehension. It starts in K through 2, and the same concepts apply right on into college. There are two main reading tests in early reading grades, kindergarten through second, and they're oral reading fluency tests and comprehension tests, written comprehension tests. To practice for an oral reading fluency test, you just need a cell phone with a timer. That's really how they do them at school. I like to use a microphone if you can set it up somewhere and kind of prop it so you can hear a child, but it's not mandatory to have a microphone. And you need a grade level passage. So you just print it out, or you can even practice from your cell phone. And you have the student put their finger on the first word, because that's how it's taught. Okay, go ahead and put your finger on the first word. They do that, and when they read, just remember to give them the word after about 2 seconds. You don't want to make them wait too long, because that's how the test is. They give them the word after a couple seconds if they miss it. So it's like this. Jose's parents, and you would say, bought him a brand new. You want to keep them moving when they read. You time them for 1 minute, you count their words, and then you practice it again and again and again. By second grade, and sometimes even in first grade, the students are asked to tell the story back. They don't have to tell it back word for word. This is tough even for adults. You just want them to remember the big idea and tell anything they can in order. If they get 3 details in order with that big idea, they score really well. So like this is all about staying at my uncle's ranch. I went to Uncle Judd, he showed me a new saddle, and we went to check on the cattle. Hey, that's a good high score on a retell for a student. When it comes to written comprehension tests, let's focus on the main types of questions they're likely to get. The big comprehension skills I teach are main idea and details, characters and setting, compare and contrast, and drawing conclusions. Those 4 skills will get you through so many comprehension tests. Then I add in cause and effect and fact and opinion. If a student understands main idea and details, they'll likely understand these other skills: summarizing, author's purpose, theme, sequencing. Summarizing. Typical questions are these. Summarize what's happening on this page. The bears need honey. What best summarizes Papa's feelings about getting honey? Summarizing questions often ask to sum up the main idea of the text, the page, the paragraph, or someone's feelings or actions. Detail. The main idea of this book is honey hunt. A detail might be Papa is taking a yellow watering can. Details. When, where, why, how. Details are anything that don't tell the main idea directly, that support it. Where did Papa go? He went to a honey tree. Don't you think your dad is clever? Sequencing. What happened first? What happened next? And what happened last? Students are usually asked to sequence an entire story or a page of the story. In this page, Papa sees the honey tree. He asks Small Bear to sit down, and then he says he's smart and is going to take out a lot of honey. Author's purpose. Author's purpose is tested as a main idea question. What is the author's purpose of this story? Sometimes they mean what's the big idea or the main idea, and in that case, the answer is a honey hunt. In this story, the author's purpose is to entertain. Students need to look at the answers and recognize that as a main idea question or a classic author's purpose question when they're being asked if the author is persuading, entertaining, or informing. An informative text would be true, full of information you can use, and a persuasive text would be trying to get you, the reader, to go get honey yourself. This is tested two ways, and it can be tricky. So, drawing conclusions, making an inference. This might be a question such as, how do you think Small Bear feels by the time he gets to the second tree? Fluent readers will comprehend well and draw good conclusions. Cause and effect. What caused the bees to fly out of the tree? Very simple when you think about it, but again, it's the words cause and effect. Teaching a student that the effect is what happened is essential. Fact and opinion. This also works for realism and fantasy, fiction, make-believe, and truth. So far, we've taught you fluency tests, how to take those, and what skills to look for on a reading test. Most of those skills are tested in a multiple choice format. So here's what I do on a multiple choice test. First of all, I try to find the key words in the question, also called the prompt. I keep those key words simple. Not fact, not a fact, not a fact. And I say them in my head as I go over every answer. I eliminate answers, and then I try to pick between my final two. Do dogs use their tongue to drink? Well, it seems easy enough, but I'd have to check that. I'd have to Google that probably just to make sure. Maybe there's some that don't. I'm going to go with dogs love people. It sounds like a fact, but it's got one of those emotional opinion words, love. So let's hone in on our second question, remembering that we want to find the key words in the prompt. We want to eliminate choices that we know can't be right, and then take our best guess. Is it true? Can I prove it? Is it a fact? I'm going to get rid of dogs hate cats because, again, it's got one of those opinion words, and we're looking for a fact. Hate, well, I don't know what they feel. Dogs smell fear. I've heard that a lot, but do we know this? Can it be proven that dogs smell fear? So the best guess, after we narrow it down, is that dogs come in many sizes. Test taking, fluency tests, skills, multiple choice. I think your child should be ready now to read and answer questions about it. Good luck. Thanks for watching.